I'm Greg Lee with KTVU Fox 2 in the Bay Area, joined by philanthropist, businessman, former presidential candidate, Tom Steyer. Tom, we always appreciate you joining us.
Greg, it's nice to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Governor Gavin Newsom, California, just named you co-chair of his new advisory council, really focusing on the economic recovery of the state after the coronavirus. Can you tell me a little bit about that group and kind of the mission statement?
Well, the idea is to make sure that we remember that the health and safety of Californians comes first. But at the same time that people across the state are hurting economically, they're worried about jobs. They're worried about taking care of their families. And the idea is to try and bring people together from around the state to work on a jobs and growth recovery, to actually try to, as fast as is safely possible, to rebuild the jobs economy in California, put people back to work, and to do it in a fair, green, and forward-thinking way. That's the idea, Greg.
Tom, yesterday the president and the White House released guidelines for reopening certain states, certainly not a formal order. But for California, why are these rules different, or why do they not apply? And why is California really focusing on what they need to do to move forward carefully here?
Well, this task force on the recovery is not about writing the health rules under which we can safely come out. That is something that Governor Gavin Newsom has outlined, and the president's outlined in terms of the framework under which we can safely come out. This task force is designed to try and make sure that under the rules that the governor has put forward and the president's describing, that we do it in a way, we're not going to go back to where we came from, Greg. You know, we're in an economic free fall, and we're going to come out of that, but we're not going to go back to where we were. And so we want to make sure that as we come out, we create jobs as fast as possible. But also, this COVID-19 has exposed injustice in our society that was always here. So as we rebuild California and create the jobs of the future, we need to make sure that we have an eye to justice, that the under-resourced communities are being hit the hardest by this, and they have to be front and center as we think about the recovery. We have to be talking about creating jobs of the future, and that includes thinking about green jobs. And we have to be doing it with an awareness of the forward-thinking, innovative history of California, of looking forward and seeing, around the corner and creating jobs in the industries that are really going to grow and employ a lot of Californians.
Tom, I want to go back to something you said. You've spent a lot of your career focusing on some of those communities that need a little bit more help, or that have been kind of marginalized. As you know, the coronavirus has disproportionately impacted communities of color, specifically members of the Black community. When you talk about economic recovery, what are some of the things that the state can do to really help those communities come out of this?
Well, as I was saying, this pandemic has exposed injustice in our society. And talking specifically about the African American community, you can see that the rate of infection there is higher, and the incidence of mortality is disproportionately higher. So we're seeing people in a community who are necessary, essential workers, who are therefore more likely to get infected because they continue to go to their jobs and put themselves at risk on behalf of everyone else in society, and who also have a higher mortality rate once they're affected. And I think it's really important to realize this isn't an environmental justice disaster. And as we move forward, we have to be aware that as we rebuild this society, we have to address racial and economic and environmental injustice at its root and try and rebuild a better society. Look at this as an opportunity to address injustice in our society, and make sure that when we see it, that the kind of growth, the kind of jobs, the kind of industries that we're supporting and creating are ones that serve people fairly and address those very issues, Greg, that I think people are painfully aware of right now, and that expose injustice that's been deep in our society, and really which this virus has exposed for everyone to see, and therefore necessarily to address front and center.
Tom, these are not just business leaders within this organization. We know there are former governors on this panel, but people from all different walks of life. And why is that so important in really encapsulating all of these issues in all of these communities?
Well, I think, Greg, it's a good idea to remember what happened after the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, 2010. And that is, there was a huge recovery. There was a lot of governmental effort put into that recovery. And it turned out that it vastly disproportioned the richest people in our country. And that, in fact, in many ways, it bailed out the banks, but it didn't bail out the people, the homeowners. That the median income in California before this COVID-19 induced recession had just gotten back to the same median income as before the Great Recession. So I think it's really important as we address this, that we don't do all of this support and investment that's going to disproportionately help the richest people. We have to make sure that we're addressing the deep income and wealth inequalities in our society, and as particularly as they are exposed in terms of race and ethnicity and gender.
Tom, to that end, as you know, the federal budget out of that $2 trillion coronavirus recovery bill, the money for small businesses has already ran out. So when you look ahead to providing support to small businesses at a state level, as you know, surely the feds are going to figure out at some point, but at the state level, what can be done for these small businesses? Because we surely are receiving a lot of emails from some very concerned folks that they might have to shutter some of their businesses.
Greg, I'm not sure if you know this, but my great partner, Kat Taylor, and I started a nonprofit community bank 15 years ago to try and address the need for finance in the most vulnerable communities, to try and address economic justice, environmental sustainability, and to support businesses owned by women and people of color. And that bank has been working very directly through the SBA program to try and save as many of those businesses as possible. And they've been going 24/7 to do it. So I'm very aware of the need of new financing. So what the state is going to be doing in a large extent is trying to be accessing different financing techniques to help people. But we're going to need that SBA program to get reloaded. Because as we know at the bank, as you know, and as small businesses across California know, the money ran out really fast.
Yeah.
And so that's going to the extent that program is going to work, it's going to have to get recharged and reloaded and dispersed so that many more. I know we didn't get to all of that our bank didn't get to help all of the businesses that we were trying to help before the money ran out. And I know that there's going to have to be another tranche for sure. And that's going to be the next thing on the docket.
Tom, being from the Bay Area, you know full well how expensive rent is. And there is currently an eviction moratorium in the state. But when you look at the end of this, as people try and catch up, right, on some of that back rent, what can be done to prevent from having more people out on the streets at the end of this?
Look, I think housing, anybody who understands the economy of California knows that housing is at the root of our inequality and has to be dramatically addressed going forward. So we're right at the start of this, Greg. I don't want to, jump to the conclusion of where we're going to come to, but there's no doubt that as we look at California going forward, everyone who's studied inequality in California knows, and I personally ran something called the Fair Shake Commission to go around the state and try and understand the roots of inequality. Housing's right at the heart of it, because housing determines not just where you put your head down at night, but where your kids go to school, the air you breathe, the supermarkets you shop in, who you hang out with, how long it takes you to get to work, who your representatives are. I mean, it is such a critical element of everybody's life, and it's right at the heart of California inequality, and it's something that absolutely has to be addressed going forward.
Tom, obviously people are eager to see some states and in California start to begin to reopen. We're in fact seeing some protests around the state from folks that want to get things going again. What is the message about the necessity of staying safe and protecting the livelihood, especially of the most vulnerable, but the community at large, while balancing that economic need?
Well, Greg, I think everybody in California should be very proud of the job that Governor Newsom has done and his team has done in supporting him. I think that he has been decisive, he has been wise, and he's been courageous in the way that he has guided the state so far. And I think everyone should realize that our ability to come back economically is completely dependent on our ability to control the health outcomes and to prevent this pandemic from raging throughout our state. So I think that everyone should realize that we will act as quickly as is safely possible, that we will bow to the governor and his team in terms of making sure that we keep health and safety of Californians first in our minds and we don't compromise it. And that within that, the framework that he's outlined for coming out, that we do everything to make sure that we come out as quick as safely possible, in a fair way, in a green way, and in the kind of forward-thinking way that has let California be a model for the country, be a model for the world about creating new ideas, building new industries, and employing. We're the 5th biggest economy in the world. It didn't just happen. That is the history we have. We're the most diverse state in the country. We should be infinitely proud of that. Let's build on our history and our values of inclusion and equity and innovation and have a California solution that we can all be proud of and that serves us all.
Tom, parting words for the community or anything you'd like to add about the work that is head of your council?
Look, we've pulled together an incredible group of people. And we know that this is a terribly difficult and sad time in our state and across the world. It is a gigantic crisis. And let's hope we can use this crisis to understand where we've come from and how we can come out of it better than we went in. That's the real goal, Greg, to deal as responsibly and compassionately with this crisis as we can, and then use it as an opportunity to really try and improve our society and get back to our basic values and live up to the values of what being a Californian really are.
Tom, we always appreciate your time. We wish you and the council the best of luck because we know there's a very large task ahead of you.
Thank you so much, Greg. It's nice to talk with you.